All right, we can get started. So first of all, my name's Christina Anderson. I'm a production coordinator in feature here at DreamWorks. Previously, I worked in TV on Abominable and the Invisible City, and I also worked on Doug Unplugs. But yeah, I'm super excited to be moderating this panel. But first of all, we can go around to all the panelists and just say your name, your title, how long you worked in the industry, and a couple of things that you worked on. Jim, you're the first one on my screen if you would like to start.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm Jim Schumann, and I'm an executive producer at DreamWorks Television Animation. We just finished up. I was with Christina on Abominable and the Invisible City, and before that, it was Spirit Riding Free. I've been in the business. This will be. I'm dating myself horribly. This will be my 35th year in June. And I started way back on Garfield, Trix Rabbit, Bobby's World, SpongeBob. I was on SpongeBob, Felix the Cat, the Pink Panther, Tom and Jerry. Just did a bunch of stuff. We started in 2D and then switched over to CG while I was at Nickelodeon, coming off of Angry Beavers, and then on to it was Tack, and then Fanboy Chum Chum and Kung Fu Panda. So yeah, keeping busy. 35 years in the business.
Congratulations on 35. That's a
Thank
huge
you.
milestone.
Amazing.
I started when I was 5.
Obviously.
I was 5 years old.
Obviously.
So.
I love that. Shabrea, do you want to go next?
I do. Hi, everyone. I am Shabrea Cleaver. I am an associate producer / producer of features and shorts at the studio on the feature side. I have been in animation for about 10 years. I'm actually born and raised at DreamWorks. So I started as a little baby intern back when I was in college, and that was kind of my first kind of intro into animation. And from there, I've worked on, let's see, Home, Kung Fu Panda 3, Trolls, Boss Baby. The last feature I worked on that has been released was Spirit Untamed, the feature. And now I'm working on a few projects in development.
Amazing. Next up, would anyone else like to share? Josh, you're next on my screen.
Sure. Hi, my name's Josh Kang. I'm a storyboard revisionist in DreamWorks TV working on an unannounced project. Unlike these veterans that we're sitting with, I've actually only completed about 1 year in animation, so this is my first production.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
It goes fast, man. It goes fast.
You're going to blink and you're going to be 35 years old like Jim.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. See?
Katie, would you like to go next?
Sure, yes. I'm Katie, and I've been in animation specifically for 4 years now, and in editorial for 7. I worked on I'm the first assistant editor at feature at DreamWorks, and I've worked on Croods 2, Puss in Boots 2, and now Panda 4.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Evan, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Evan Boucher. I am a rigging lead in feature. I've been in the industry about 12 years now, and most of the time has been at DreamWorks. So first project was Peabody and Sherman, and then I did Penguins of Madagascar, and then after that, Boss Baby, How to Train Your Dragon 3, Croods 2, Bad Guys, Ruby Gilman, and now I'm working on an unannounced, I think it's an unannounced project. So
I can verify that your project is unannounced, yes.
It's like, please do not say anymore.
I think it's the most unannounced of all the unannounced projects. Awesome. Well, so some of the people who are in this call and some of the people who we're recording this for work in our London office or work for the larger Universal companies. They don't necessarily work in animation, and they don't necessarily get much exposure to how we make movies and TV shows. So for those people who don't have a lot of animation experience, can you explain what you do for your role? So like, what is storyboarding? And just like a brief little snippet of what that is. And also where you fit in to the animation pipeline. Anyone can start.
Well, since you mentioned storyboarding, I guess I'll go first. Once again, I'm a storyboard revisionist. So I work closely with my director to execute their vision. So what the board artists do is they create the bulk, the blueprint of the show. And after our director, I work with Rob Briggs. After he reviews it, he'll essentially give me notes saying, hey, I think this is what we should do. And this is my idea for this. Can you help me essentially redraw and, enact his vision?
Perfect. Thank you.
Should we go to editorial next? That just makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I'm the first assistant editor, and editorial really is the place where we get assets from every department, to help build the movie to its latest version for the director. And that's everything from storyboards to layout, animation, lighting, effects. They all send their material to us. We will cut it to dialogue, music, and sound effects. And we will be presenting the latest versions of the cut to leadership. And as an assistant editor, my job is to bring in those assets, and I'll do some sound designing. I'll do some light, maybe some, if they really need this like key to shine on a storyboard. If we can't get it back to a board artist, they'll, could color it in. Also, we will, for our actors, when we record them, we will take, it's maybe about a 4-hour session. We'll bring it in and we will type pretty much verbatim what they say into our program, so that way when we need to cut in the line, we can just type in, does Poe ever say and the? We can type that in and we'll find the bit of dialogue.
That's cool, man. I'll be honest with you. When I was 5 years old, we didn't do it that way.
Jim, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah. No, my job as a executive producer, also / supervising producer, is to oversee the project from script to screen, in terms of working with the line producer and whoever the writing executive producer is to figure out what the show is, what the vision of the show, what it's going to look like, how we're going to shoot it, what's the tone, work all that out, and then work with the line producer to build the crew out, the production staff, the storyboard artists, the storyboard revisionists, and then supervise the project all the way through post and final mix. It's a blast. I mean, it's just one of my big joys is just working with every single department. When you first start out, Christina will tell you this, when you start out with that first handout, and then you follow it all the way through to post. It's just a blast.
Oh, absolutely. And I loved working with Jim too. Jim is the best. Not that I'm playing favorites. Everyone here is the best.
Wow.
That's sweet.
Ryan, the new person that I work with, would you like to?
Yeah,
It's expensive, Shabrea. It's a lot of check writing to Christina. I'll tell you that.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, yes,
I thought so. I can piggyback off of that, even though Jim and I have both the producer in our title. And so what I'm doing on one of the projects is kind of very much that like line producer. So the difference is, Jim, yours is a lot more creative in the sense that like you are overseeing it in a creative space as well. And then for me, on one of the projects I'm on, it is very much like, okay, those people have the creative vision. Now, how are we going to make this? Okay, money and budget and schedule wise, how does this all work out? So it is us working closely together. And so day to day, it's really just being the facilitator and making sure that, like, okay, with this beautiful thing that we want to make, how can I make sure that we are hitting the milestones, that we are actually going to be able to deliver this at scale? And then, so that's for one part of it. And then on the other projects I'm working on is more of like a creative producer. It is kind of figuring out what is the story that your team, your directors want to tell, and making sure that that also syncs up with the story that the studio wants to tell. Sometimes those don't always align. So it's always getting on the same page about that, but also just figuring out what is the story that you want people to walk away from when they leave the movie theater. And so being a help in facilitating that. I also have a short that we're working on. And so that, again, is like working with my directors to make sure that we can bring on the right people, that we are putting the right assumptions in place for what we think this is going to look like. So it's just, I mean, literally, we are making this shit up every project. So it's every project has been different for me. Even in the same role on certain projects, it's been different. And so you're really just kind of gathering all the pieces of the puzzle and putting together a large, beautiful photo.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for explaining that difference between like creative producing and like line producing. I think when I started in animation, I was very confused about like, they're all producers, right? And how does one get promoted from line producer to just producer? What does that mean?
How's that work?
It's like, is that not the same thing? Have they not been doing that already? Thank you so much for explaining that. Evan, I think you're last, right?
Yeah, so I'm a lot more in the nitty gritty of the technical stuff. So I'm a character rigger, which basically in CG, that's essentially we have to build the digital puppets that animators use to pose out the characters in time, basically. So we are kind of like the person between the modeling phase and the animation phase. So we have to do everything from like setting up the internal like armature, skeleton, kind of making sure that when the animators move the character's arms around, that the muscles like move properly, or the perceived muscles. We, designing facial expressions, trying to make sure that we do all the technical stuff so that the animators can hit the shapes that they want. So it's tech in service of art. So you have to have kind of a real strong background in both technical and artistic chops, basically. So.
And anatomy, like you have to know so much.
One day you're like you have to be a computer science major. Another day you have to be like an expert at biomechanics and physiology, and then you have to understand all how animators work and what they're going for, and so it's a convergence of a lot of different disciplines, basically.
That sounds so crazy complicated. But since we started going in this direction anyway, one of the questions that was asked ahead of time is, how did you get your career in the industry start, and how did you choose your current career? So like, did you study computer science and anatomy and everything? Like, how did you?
So for me, it was like in school. Well, let's start before I even went to school. So I personally originally was planning to go into like zoology or some sort of bioscience sort of field, right? Biology, zoology, something like that. And then at the last minute, I was like, nah, I'm going to go make cartoons instead. So decided to go do that. And then I was like, determined to be an animator essentially. And I was like, oh, I got to be an animator. And I was like, well, if I want to animate stuff, I want to animate my own characters, not just like stock rigs you find online and stuff. So I got to learn how to build them. And then I found that I actually like had sort of a knack for the rigging stuff. And I was so not a technical person when I started. It was like daunting and scary. And I thought more artistically and all that. But with a lot of practice and just kind of repetition, I found that I was actually, kind of decent at it. And then when I realized just how much of that sort of anatomy and stuff comes into it, and how much I love it, kind of tickled that part of my brain that loves kind of geeking out about like comparative anatomy and animals and bones and muscles and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so I was like, okay, this is like a nice little spot where, you know, that kind of interest in biology and, you know, comparative anatomy and stuff actually really helps a lot, because it helps you understand how things function, because it's not just about, you know, a modeler needs to know like the shapes and what the shapes look like, but like a rigger needs to know like how does this function, how, you know, how do these shapes change over time, when, you know, how does it deform, how do you get those shapes through moving the rig. So yeah, so that's pretty, there's a lot goes into it, but it kind of gives me an excuse to kind of like tell people cool factoids about animals, and that's kind of what I try to do. So
Love that.
That's super cool. And such a cool journey from like one thing to like something totally different. Jim, you said you started here when you were 5 years old.
I
Did
was.
you like did you always think you were going to work in animation?
No, I actually wanted to make live action films, and then I was at that point, I was in my 20s, my early 20s. Actually, I was 4.
The pristine age of
That's
4
right.
and a half.
That critical
good
age,
year.
Shabrea, a critical age of 4.
Yeah, good year.
No, I always drew, so I just decided, well, this is what I do best. You know, I draw. I want to get into, you know, animation, and I started as an intern. I was a Academy of Television Arts and Sciences intern, and I was at a studio called Film Roman way back, and it was a boutique studio. There was only about 9 people there, and I started as an in-betweener. And it was a small studio, so I was able to hop around. When I wasn't in betweening, I was able to do storyboard revisions or storyboard work in layout work, and then animator and animator's assistant, animator, and then just worked my way up. And from there, I was at that studio for about 9 years, then Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network, and then I did some work for Warner Brothers, and just worked my way up. Just basically that. My education was on the job, because the year prior to that, I got turned down by CalArts. So there's different journeys to get here, Matt. There's different journeys.
Oh, I totally agree. And like, I come from a computer science background, and I do nothing with coding anymore. So school's not
That happens.
Yeah, Little Bucks County Community College is where I'm from. So
since you mentioned that you
Bucks
previously
County. I'm from Montgomery County.
oh, very cool. You know where I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
But since you mentioned that you wanted to be in live action originally, and I know Katie has experience working in live action stuff. Katie, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. Well, when I actually thought I was going to be an animator. I loved animated movies as a kid, and when I was 10, my dad got me a camera that came with some rudimentary editing software, and that's where I started playing with editing, and it became such a hobby that by about middle school, high school, I veered course and decided that after I saw How to Train Your Dragon, I said, oh, I still want to edit, but I'll edit animated movies instead, and I want to work for DreamWorks one day. So leading up before I got here, I moved out here to California from the East Coast, and I started working at Warner Brothers for editing promos for their live action shows. So, the next on The Big Bang Theory, those kinds of TV spots is where I got my start editing out here in LA. And but the unions and guilds are different for every, I think, department or artists. And I actually, when I moved out here, I started applying to animation editing jobs, not realizing that a lot of the major studios couldn't even legally hire me because I wasn't in the Editors Guild. So once I learned that I had to work a certain amount of non-union hours in order to qualify, which my Warner Brothers job was, that's when I let my, people I had met through the grapevine at DreamWorks know that, hey, I'm in the union. I can work in animation now. And they reached out one day, and I've been here ever since.
That's so awesome. And that's cool that you like wanted to start off as an animator, but then you like ended up in a different side of things. Cool. Josh, would you like to go next?
Sure. Well, one thing's for sure, I'm definitely not one of those individuals that knew that he wanted to work in animation since they were a kid. I think it's excellent that people do, and I kind of wish that I was one of them. But my path involves meandering through just different art industries. I've worked as a fine art salesman. I've worked as a graphic designer. Hell, I've even worked as a handyman and a cashier before, I'm sure we've all been there too. So during my graphic design career, I discovered that people work to make these beautiful pieces of work, animation. And I did a deep dive into the pipeline and discovered storyboarding, found it incredibly beautiful, and I haven't looked back since. So essentially, I made a career change. I had been graphic designing for 7 years-ish. And when I finally decided to, really reach for my goals and go for this dream career that I wanted, the pandemic hit. So this was in 2020, and we all have our own crazy stories of what happened. Mine is I took my first figure drawing class in March of 2020, well, February going into March, and halfway during the class, we all had to go home, and we all know how that feels and how sucky it was. But fortunately, I think that I made the most of my time. I just kind of made a plan for myself, and I kept my head down and I just drew every day, literally every day, of 2020. I would have I think I had this ream of pink paper that I just found out of nowhere, and it was going to get thrown away, and I took that and I said, I'm going to use this so that it goes to something good, but also so I can practice. So one every day, filled front and back. And 3 years later, I'm here.
That is such an inspiring story. Thank you so much for telling us that.
Of course, thank you.
I think that really shows that even if you don't work in animation right now, and this is something that you do want, you can put in that work and make it happen. And even if obstacles get thrown at your way, like an entire pandemic, you can still make it. And I think that's so powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Shreya, would you like to finish out this question?
Yeah. I definitely did not know I was going to end up in animation. Like many of us, I grew up watching animated films, and even more so, I'm going to say it, I liked DreamWorks movies more than Disney movies. I found myself watching those movies more. But I never thought oh, yeah, that's a place that I could work someday, because I was I can't draw. My stick figures they're not good. So, obviously I was that's not a thing for me. But as I was figuring out what I wanted to be when I grow up, I'm still figuring that out. But at one point I was oh, okay, movies. Yeah, I'd love to be in the process of movies, whatever that means. I just want to be there and in the middle of it. And so obviously that was live action for me. So I started in live action. I did some indie films, and I actually worked on So You Think You Can Dance. That was a couple of seasons worth on that show. And so it just so happens I was looking for an internship to graduate, and looking back, which is hilarious, it was Universal and it was DreamWorks looking for interns. This is well before Universal has now owned us. And I was like, I really want the Universal one. That's the one I want. But I'm like, okay, I guess I'll apply to DreamWorks. Again, I can't draw, so what am I gonna do there? And so I applied to both. Didn't even get a call from Universal, and I got a call from DreamWorks. I came in and I'm like, please don't ask me for a portfolio because I can't draw. So please, I have no idea what I'm doing here. And then I met this panel of production people, and they're like, this is what we do. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I could work in the entertainment industry, and I don't have to be on a set for 15 hours a day, and I can have a social life. That's what you're telling me? And I could also be treated really nicely? I don't know if I believe this. So I did I was like, okay, fine. I'll try it out. And so I did my internship on High Train Dragon 2 and completely fell in love with the animation process. Like, it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. I got so used to like being in live action as a PA, like, you are doing a good job if you are not heard or seen. And then I got here and they were like, no, we see you and we want to hear from you. And what do you think? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so it was such a different experience for me. And I felt so kind of welcomed in. And also just like people were so nice with like showing me the ropes. And so I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. So I like literally right after graduation, I'm like keeping in contact with the recruiters. Hey, I updated my resume. There's a new comma on that line there. So I thought you should have that. And so keeping in contact. And then finally there was an opening on the movie Home. And I came on as a lighting production assistant. And really from there, I just kind of worked my way up on different projects to now being a producer.
That's so insane. And oh my gosh, I totally forgot that you worked on So You Think You Can Dance. I remember being a kid and like watching that show and being like, some way or another, I'm going to be part of that. And I'm not a part of it, but I'm part of a project that someone who worked on it is part of. So
there you
like
go.
The same thing.
There you go. It's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? Like that's
Exactly.
you're good. You basically worked on it.
Onto a more like production kind of question. Someone asked, how long does an animation film or TV show take to be made? Like start to finish, like basic first idea, first pitch of it, all the way to it hitting theaters or like your screen. Shreya, since you work in development, do you want to handle the feature side of this?
Yeah. It could be anywhere from 2-ish years to a lot longer. 3, 4, sometimes longer than that. It also just depends on what that development phase is. One of the features that Christina and I are working on now has been in development for over 3 years. And we haven't gotten started yet. So it depends. There's also been projects like Abominable, the feature. That probably from start to finish with all the changes and creative changes that happened within was probably like 6-ish years, maybe more. So it definitely depends. It depends, but it can range anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5.
Such a good answer. Thank you.
Like, that is not helpful for you guys. It can be really quick or the rest of your life.
I think it's important to know that there's like a huge range and a lot of things can be really unpredictable, especially in the feature side of things.
Totally.
That is something that I learned moving from TV to feature. But Jim, since you work in production and TV, would you like to explain how it differs maybe and how long it would take?
Yeah, no, for TV we move faster, whether you're coming off, whether you're doing a show based on a feature or original idea. We just did 20 episodes of Abominable. They're 22 minutes each, and it took from start to finish about 2 years. So you have multiple teams that are working on an episode at one time in the schedule. So the schedule is overlapped. So yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you know, like we would be in post on a show, and you would look at the schedule a year ago, and you're like, oh my gosh, we handed this show out. We started boards on this show, you know, 6 months to a year. But like I said, because you have staggered teams working on it. So yeah, on average, it's about for 20 episodes, it's about 2 years. You know, for Spirit, we were on that. I was on that for close to, we did 3 seasons, like total 80 episodes, and we were on that for about 5-6 years. So yeah, it depends. Like you know, like I said, the TV moves a little quicker, but like Shabrea was saying, it's, you know, once you get it out of development, that's when you're really moving, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think that cool thing about being in TV is, like, especially I was an episodic coordinator, so that means that I was working on like every single department, but I knew certain episodes really, really well. And so it was like for the very first episode that I was working on, it would be in final post and like it's like being mixed and stuff. And then my very last episode, we're just handing out storyboards for it. And so it's like interesting to be working on both sides of the pipeline at the exact same time. Whereas like if you're working on a feature, you're more of like in a department. And so it's like right now I'm just an art coordinator and all I see is art. I live in Artland and I'll be in
But
Artland.
the one thing that you also did, I mean, in production, and that's and with television is, you know, you've got, you know, on average 6 episodes going at one time, where you're in various stages of it.
Yep.
You know, one might be just, you know, you're just starting off boards, but another one is already in post.
Yep.
You know, and keeping track of all that is it's a big job. So that's why I always give, you know, big kudos to the production teams. You know, they're a huge part of the success of TV art feature.
I totally agree. I was a huge part of the success.
Yeah, no, it is.
So much.
No, it is. You know, I mean, if you're prepared and you've got things worked out, you know, it allows for more time to make. You're not chasing your tail. You know, you're making more creative decisions.
Totally.
Christina has saved my life more than one occasion. I wouldn't even have time to sit here and do this with you guys if it wasn't for Christina. So,
well, so kind of leading into another question, and this is for everybody. How have you kept yourself motivated throughout your career? Have there been times where you're like, I give up, I'm never working in animation ever again, and then like an hour later, you're like, no, I do love this. How do you stay motivated? Anyone can start.
Well, I know that Puss in Boots had definitely a more hectic schedule, especially once we were, you know, all full steam ahead into production. And I wouldn't say that I ever had like a moment where I'm leaving animation, that's it. But there were definitely days where, you know, when you're working weekends and late nights, it's tiring. So how do you stay, you know, and kind of in love with your craft? And some people probably won't do this, but I remember I watched Shrek 2 because I grew up watching that, and that was kind of like the reminder. I was like, oh yeah, I'm working on, you know, Puss in Boots' next journey right now. This is really, really cool. And that was kind of the boost I needed. And sometimes that's just kind of revisiting what inspired you in the first place in general, whether it's a favorite movie or even a book or something that inspired this passion for you in the beginning. Going back to that definitely helps revitalize you. Even if you're not ready to quit, it's just you know, I just need a boost.
I think I'm also, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, I was just going to say something transitional. Go for it.
I think also for me, it's the inspiration of the people around me that motivates me. Like, it makes me want to do my best work when I'm working with people who like inspire me. So I would say that's a huge part of it. I also have a healthy amount of imposter syndrome. So I'm going to be working on myself for the rest of my life. And so that, you know, I use that as a driver to like push myself to continue to learn. And, you know, I think the fun and sometimes not so fun part about animation is like it's always evolving. And so I don't think anyone will ever be like, okay, I really cracked this animation thing. I know exactly what I'm doing. And so to have that and share that with other people who are also going through the same thing, I think there's like a bit of growing pains that comes with that. And so it's always kind of exciting to see what are we going to be doing in animation next year, because it's going to be different than what we're doing now. So
Totally. Yeah. I know that I feel that imposter syndrome too, but Shabria, you're so talented and you don't need
Hey,
to.
can I ask you guys a question? What is imposter syndrome?
yes, it is the feeling of being a fraud. Honestly, it's like, am I worthy of being here? Do I deserve being here? Have I earned this? And so it's very common amongst women, especially in corporate positions, to feel like, have I earned my place here? And should I even be here? And I've struggled with that my entire career. And, it doesn't mean that I've worked any less harder than anyone else, but
Right.
I am constantly questioning, like,
It's
am I doing
something
enough? Do I know enough?
It's something internal. It's just kind of in the wiring that you're trying to
Yeah.
figure out.
It's internal, but it's also like, you don't see a lot of, for me, Black women in the position that I'm in. Like,
Mhm.
I was the first Black production manager, the first Black producer. So like, there's a lot of barriers that are like systemic things that I'm overcoming. And so it's a little bit me, but it's also just kind of like the industry at large of feeling like, oh, I don't know if I have a place here because I haven't seen someone do this before. So it's a little bit of both.
Well, don't forget to look back on what you said. How long have you been in the business?
10 years.
Don't ever forget to look back on what you've accomplished.
Yeah.
Part of this business, we don't give ourselves pats on the back enough.
Yeah.
So be proud of that. I mean, really, because I've talked to other folks about this too. Don't forget to do that. Look back on and to say, because it goes fast, right? I mean, 10 years probably feels like 10 months, right? But don't forget to look back and on what you've done. We tend not to do that, as creatives. And if that's important to say, you know what, I'm still standing. I'm still standing.
I love that.
I must be doing something right. And the fact that you said, because how the business is changing and how the business changes, right? It's that old saying where you can't control the storm, but you can control the sails. You're able to do that. 10 years is a good. 10 years is a good run. 1 year is a good run. I was listening to Josh. I mean, you got the juice to do it. So, yeah. So I hear what you're saying, but don't ever forget to take a moment to stop and give yourself credit for what you've done.
That's really great advice. That's great.
Yeah, I would like to piggyback on kind of what Shabrea was saying about the imposter syndrome stuff, because it's, especially in creative roles, it's so real. It's so real. So any artist can tell you, you can be like, you can go up to any artist and be like, wow, this thing that you made is amazing. And they'd be like, it's okay. And that's not them like, trying to be humble. It's like they don't see it, how it is in their mind. They're always trying to strive for better. The more you can compare yourself to other artists, the more it kind of like, it's like an internal struggle. So I had a lot of imposter syndrome when I found myself actually in the animation department on How to Train Your Dragon 3. I did like a 6-month stint in there because of the way scheduling worked out and stuff. And I was like, all right, I'm going to animate in the big leagues with all these world-class animators. And I was
heavy hitters.
Terrified. And, I did my best, kind of like, rolling with the punches and kind of giving my all into everything that they threw at me. But, without having their experience, I'm just like, oh man, why am I doing this? And you beat yourself up for it every time you start a shot. You're just like, this is terrible. This is awful. Why do I do this? And then as you keep working, it starts to get a little better, and with some guidance, and it gets there. But what was nuts to me is after that experience, I remember going to a buddy of mine who's like a supervising animator and the most brilliant animator, fantastic at everything, just the most creative, kind of off the wall, zany ideas that he would come up with. And I just remember watching him work, and even at that level, he's going through the same thing in his head, just being like, oh, is this good enough? Is this good enough? I don't know. And I'm like, dude, you're like freaking
No,
amazing.
Evan, that never goes away.
Yeah, exactly.
Because right now I'm working on development stuff, and I'm developing and drawing and painting and digital work. And I remember my first week in the business. I would come back to the apartment going, oh my God, because when I was in high school, and I don't know if you guys are the same way, all through school, I was the artist. Like, I'm the artist guy, I was known as the artist. And then I moved 3,000 miles from home, and I go into this building where there's 30 of me, and it was just like this, you're like, holy shit, So there was a couple of things I just took a beat, and you kind of went into this. I took a beat and said, wait a second, what I've done has got me here, where I'm at right now. And that's like Shabrea, that's what I was saying, where I kind of had to look back. Okay, what I've done has got me here. I'm not as good as some of these folks. I will be. I just take it day at a time, just one day at a time. Learn something new every day. Every day, learn something new. But like I said, where that feeling never goes away, make that your friend.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that makes you go, oh, I'm not going to settle. I'm gonna try something else. This looks good. Oh, I'm gonna just take that layer away, and I'm gonna try something else. It's your friend. It keeps you honest. So you're not just crapping stuff out. So.
And one thing that's really great about DreamWorks compared to other studios, and it's not cutthroat. Like, everyone is supportive, and they're like, oh, you want to learn how to get better at animation? That's awesome. I want to share with you everything that I know, opposed to being like, who's this guy? I'm not going to help them and let them fail so that they're not a threat to me. Like, there's none of that at this studio, which is absolutely incredible.
No, it is. It's great. Real quick, I was at a studio that will remain nameless that was very cliquish. The one thing about, I think, successful studios is that everybody's on a different production, but you feel like you're working for the same thing. This particular studio was like each production was its own island, and there wasn't that kind of, like you're saying, like where you could go to someone and talk to them about something, or take a class or have a conversation. I think that's one thing that DreamWorks does really well. It kind of cultivates that culture of that artistic collaboration.
I totally agree. Josh, go for
So
it.
questions, motivation, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Well, before I get into that, I just want to say, well, for what it's worth, Shabrea, I just met you, and I think you're incredible. Well, I think you're all incredible,
God,
needless to say. But
no,
for
tell
real.
me more. This is about me, you guys. Okay, go on, Josh.
I really appreciate you sharing that part of your journey with us. And, it's true. Like, so many people go through it in so many different ways. But, it's always nice hearing it every time, because it's such a common thing. Regarding motivation, my motivation as an artist, I think Katie mentioned going back to your origins. I think that's really important for me. Mine is to achieve mastery at a craft. That's very important to me. And that craft is story. And so it's something that I've staked a lot on, if not everything on, as soon as I found out about it. And I plan to continue doing that forever. So that keeps me going, because there are days when, as artists, we don't feel as productive, or we don't feel as sharp, and it can fluctuate, and we are definitely our worst critics, for sure. When things get like that, I usually think it's very important to remind ourselves to be kind to ourselves, and in turn that helps us be kind to others and empathize with other artists as well, and other creatives, anyone really, because it's not about giving up, it's about giving in for a little bit so that you can keep going. I think that's really important. Persistence, consistency, the bigger picture. At the end of the day, even if you rest a bit, it doesn't mean you're not. It doesn't mean you're going to stop. You're going to keep going, and you'll reach that goal wherever you want on your own time. Cheers.
That's really good advice. Really good advice. Cheers. Thank you all so much for sharing all of that, and especially like about imposter syndrome. Like I know I feel that a lot too, and I struggle with like finding motivation sometimes, but then like either talking to people or like seeing a really cool animated movie or short or TV show will like get me excited about it again. And I think that's really good advice for everybody. The next question I have is, what is the best piece of advice you've received in your career? Or what advice would you give someone that's either starting out in animation and is brand new, or is in animation and wants to get promoted? That was a very big question. So anyone can start.
Want me to go first? I'll go first. Is that cool?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yours.
No, I would say the best. The advice I got, and I still give it to people today, particularly young artists that are starting out, is to really, whether you're an artist, whether Katie, Katie's an editor, what we're all doing is be adaptable. Make sure you can adapt your styles. Like a lot of creatives and artists get into trouble when they have one style that they can do. You will always work if you can adapt your styles. Like one day you might be drawing or doing, let's say, boards. One day you might be doing boards for Adventure Time. The next week you might be doing boards for a really graphic show. The people that are able to adapt to that, because that's what I learned when I was a board artist, was to be able to adapt my styles and storytelling in my storyboards, so I would always get hired. What happens is sometimes people get so focused, like they just draw a certain way. They just think a certain way. And that's cool if you get that project that's in your wheelhouse, or if you sell a show based on what you do. But if you don't adapt, make your style adaptable, you're going to have a hard time finding work in the business. And particularly like right now, we're kind of in a contraction right now with, we're in a bit of a dry period, which is fine. The animation's not going anywhere. I've been through dry periods. It'll go up, but in those dry periods, if you're able to do different styles, you'll get through it. So that would be my biggest advice.
That's really good advice. And I think that applies to like both creative positions and non-creative positions. I feel like for example, I came from TV and I was like, oh, I think this is exactly how this works. I know exactly what to do. And I head over to feature and I'm like, that's totally different. You have to be adaptable and like be willing to learn and like not just like work like below what you think your job requires, but also like work above and like just like have that desire to learn from everybody around you. And DreamWorks is a really great place to do that because everyone wants to help you, like Evan mentioned. So,
and
yeah,
to kind of make a mark on both your points, being adaptable and also being able to. I'm so sorry. You totally made a really good point, and I just lost my thought. But that is to go back to say being adaptable and following different forms. Like sometimes you get notes in different ways, and I can't believe I lost my thought. Does someone else want to go while I get that back?
Yeah, I could say I think it's also being prideful in your work. That comes through in a big way. Even the small things, like I'll say that, even the small things, taking pride in what you're doing, that really shows, and that shows people how much you care. So being willing to jump on the little things or the big things. I think one of the things when I was an intern that honestly was like my standout thing was like I would come into the rooms and organize all the chairs and make sure all the agendas were out. And it was like, that's not like, oh, okay, in your job description, it is your job to make sure that the chairs are in this design. But it was something that people really appreciated walking into the room, like, okay, I'm ready. Like, I'm not, it's very mental in a lot of ways. And so something as small as that made such an impact on people of like, Shabrea always just comes in and sets the room up, and it's just nice to like walk into an organized space so that we can like focus. So just the little things, like you don't realize how much people appreciate those and see your value and that you bring even in just the small things. So don't focus on like the big projects solely, like really lean into those little things as well.
That absolutely reminded me of what
Yay!
I was saying, which was because that you're absolutely right. Those little things go such a long way when you get noticed and recognized for that. And that is to say, when you can anticipate what people around you are going to need, what your superior or your boss is going to need. Obviously when you first start out, you have lots of questions, and sometimes you may not even know who to ask a particular question to. Get to know your team, get to know everybody, and you will learn in time. And as you learn, being able to adapt and anticipate what people are going to need, that gets you noticed. That people pay attention to that, and they do appreciate it, and that will help you grow.
And one way to kind of, help with all that stuff is like, at the end of the day, like all sort of talent and job and stuff aside, it just taking a step back, like just be a cool person that people want to work with. Like just be kind and gracious, and be willing to help people and listen and all that sort of stuff. Because like, I don't know, I think that a lot can be said of someone's character. I think that's the most important thing, because even if like, you're working on like, something that nobody's particularly excited about, because you don't always get to choose your projects, right? Like we get to work on lots of cool variety here, but you don't always get to choose what you're on. But it's ultimately the people that make the day to day. So that's how you get through, right? Is you guess, even if it's not something everybody's excited about, if you're having fun making it, then that's what it's all about. So
may I remind you that these projects, again, 2 to anywhere between 5 years. So obviously, making yourself a person who like people want to work around is going to be a big deal. That was a good point.
Totally.
Sorry,
Go
go
ahead. No, Josh, go ahead.
Okay. I guess in case I don't have a chance to say it later, thank you, Christina and Tom, for moderating. Really appreciate you both. And it was really cool meeting everyone here. My word of advice would probably be remember what you're doing it for. I think it's really important to keep in sight and keep in mind the objective of your actions. And this can go from macro to micro. So remembering what I'm doing something for on a story level, it would be like, why am I drawing this thing for this panel, right? It's usually to convey an emotion, right? And that is usually my guiding light. If I suddenly don't know what I'm doing, because I remember the objective, it'll help me get there, and probably even faster and better. So I think no matter where you go, whether you're going into animation for the first time, or you've been in the business for a while and you're trying to elevate yourself higher, I think it's really important to remember why you're doing something, and that could even mean why you want to do something as well. Bit broad, but
No, love that.
Still good. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
Thank you for the thanks, and thank you to all the panelists who have joined, and having such like a wholesome conversation. This was like so lovely to hear from all of you. I have one last fun question, rapid fire. Who is your favorite DreamWorks character? Anyone go?
Toothless. I love
Megamind.
Oh, I was gonna say Megamind.
Yeah.
Toothless, Super Megamind.
Like, don't make me choose between my babies.
I have to.
Come on, Evan. Who's yours?
For me, is probably the most difficult character that I had to set up, which was Dave the Octopus from Penguins.
You rigged him?
I rigged the face on that one, yeah.
Wow.
That's up to you.
I'm,
That
I'm drawing a blank, but who's the penguin that tomograph?
Skipper.
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 Yeah, Skipper's a piss. Oh my God, man. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm working actually with Private, the Penguin, Chris Knights. He's our lead editor on Panda 4 right now.
Oh, cool. Yeah. No. Yeah. That's. Oh my God.
So good.
That's awesome. Well,
Christina,
Katie.
what's yours?
well, okay, so I worked on Abominable and the Invisible City. That was like my first project that I took start to finish. So my favorite is Jin from the series because that's
Yeah.
the most relatable character for me personally.
Yep. I feel that.
Yeah. So definitely Jin for me. But yeah, once again, just to close this out, thank you all so
I'm
much.
sorry. Who did Katie and Josh say?
Katie said
I said
Toothless,
Megamind.
and yeah.
Oh, okay. And Katie,
And I said Toothless. I mean,
oh, that's right.
it's a giant pet, you know,
Yeah.
one that you can fly on. That's pretty cool.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Sorry,
Well,
Christina.
no, it's all good. Thank you all so much for joining, and thank you to the audience for listening. Yeah, we're hoping to do more events like this in the future. But if you have any ideas, feel free to reach out to me or to Tom Coyne, and we'll make sure your ideas happen.
Yay.
I'm gonna stop the recording.